Welcome back, everybody. Venus and Star Blessings. So I'm going to talk about the new moon in Virgo. Before I do, I just want to just quickly mention that I just uploaded a video that I did with Rumen Kolev, which I encourage you to watch. It's a very different way of understanding astrology. Very, very different way of understanding the meaning to the planets, the signs, all sorts of things. It's just a very different level of astrology. And so I'm doing these videos with Rumen, who's gracious enough to give us his time for free in order to bring more awareness to the ancient teachings and to inspire people to learn it, to embark on the path of studying the ancient teachings. So in that video, we talked about Mars, but we talked about a lot of other different things, a lot of different astrological principles and concepts, and some matters around Mars, because Mars will be invisible for a few months, essentially, which is a really big deal. And in that video, you will hear Rumen speak of very significant events that align with the invisibility of Mars, like what that means collectively and how we could view it individually as well. And we talk about a lot of other different things. So check out that video. It's up on my channel at the moment, and let me know what you think. And I will be back with Rumen with much more. I have many questions, many ideas, many inspired visions that I wish to share with Rumen, and then, obviously share with you guys. Also, just reminding you all that my classes are open. They have started. And even though we have started, you can still join. We've only done one class so far. The next one is this weekend. And also I'm opening it up to allowing people to choose whichever class they want to do out of the 10-week block. The 10-week block is the first block. And basically these classes will run as 10-week blocks ongoing, essentially, because I've got many different topics, so many classes to come. So reach out if you're interested in knowing what those classes are and what the first one was, if you want to know. So I'm having a headache today. Yeah, I'll let you know about those details and that information. And also, if you watch the video I did with Rumen and you're interested in reaching out to him for his courses and his books and webinars, because he's got loads of stuff. There's lots of things that he offers that you can reach out to him for. His details are under the description of that video. Okay, so the new moon in Virgo is really quite an interesting new moon for so many different reasons. So let's begin unpacking some of those reasons, some of those themes. The first thing I guess I want to bring up is that Mercury is now a morning star. There it is there, rising this morning. A couple of days ago, we had the Cazimi conjunction. That is a conjunction between Sun and Mercury, an exact conjunction, which is called the Cazimi, which is an Arabic term which translates to in the heart of the sun. So we had the Cazimi, and now we have Mercury as a morning star. In ancient traditional astrology, the morning star Mercury corresponds to the god Apollo. So just like Venus morning star corresponds to the goddess Athena, the warrior goddess Athena. Well, in the same way, we have an association with the Mercury being either a morning star or an evening star. When he's a morning star, he's connected to Apollo. And when he's an evening star, he's connected to Hermes. So morning star, god Apollo, is it's a very powerful place for Mercury. I suppose it's worth looking into the god Apollo if you're not familiar with him, but basically, he was a leader of all the muses. He was a musician, artist, he was a healer, he was a a prophet, you know, divination, you know, so many wonderful talents and skills and qualities connected to the god Apollo. You know, he's revered, basically. Very powerful god. So Mercury as a morning star symbolizes the qualities of this god Apollo. And so that's part of the energy of what we are presently in. And when we get to the new moon chart, which I'll show you in a moment, there's more that I think draws from this as well. I just wrote something this morning, which I will just read. The morning star Mercury is said to be of the nature of Apollo. Apollo is the sun god. He's also an oracular god as a patron of Delphi, and could predict prophecy through the Delphic oracle Pythia. Pythia is another Greek goddess, actually. He's associated to healing, medicine, art, music. He was a leader of the Muses, and so on and so forth, which I've kind of already touched on. And also remember that when Mercury stationed retrograde in August, Mercury was in a kite aspect pattern, basically with Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus. So basically there was a grand trine, and Neptune was opposite Mercury. That's what forms a kite aspect pattern. It's a triangle, meaning 3 planets are forming a trine to each other. And then there's a planet from the top of the pyramid, if you like, on the other end, that kind of creates the kite formation. And that planet that's at the bottom, which creates the kite formation, is the key to the kite aspect pattern. And Mercury was in this formation when he started his retrograde journey. And I bring that up because there's something very fascinating happening with this new moon. Exactly the same pattern we have again with the new moon, which I think is, you know, pretty interesting. So here's the new moon in Virgo. It's always a sun moon conjunction. That's a new moon. Now you can see it's opposite Neptune. All right, we can see that it's trine Pluto. Pluto, of course, is sextile Neptune. Neptune is sextile Uranus, and Pluto is trine Neptune. So these are the other 2 aspects involved in a kite. And then Uranus is trine the new moon. So can you see how that literally looks like a kite? Because that's what it is, and that's why it's called a kite aspect pattern. Aspect patterns are really fascinating, and that's a topic that I'll be teaching in my classes next year. So if you're interested in that, let me know. I have this particular aspect pattern in my own charts. So not only do I understand it from theory, I understand it in real life because I've seen how it operates for me. And it's one of my favorite patterns and aspect patterns in my own chart, because Venus is the planet holding the kite together for me, and it makes so much sense for my life story, what I'm doing, what I'm speaking about today. It's all there. It's all reflected through this kite. So we had Mercury station retrograde in a kite formation, meaning his retrograde journey took in these energies. These exact same energies that you see right here. It's the exact same planets in the exact same alignment. And here we have the new moon picking up the exact same aspect pattern. That's kind of uncanny. Kite aspect pattern, the kite aspect pattern really is a tremendous source of creative energy. It's more than that. Like, you know, I'm just simplifying it, but just think about energies coming together in perfect harmony, perfect alignment, because what we are talking about is we are talking about trine aspects and sextile aspects. That they are considered to be soft aspects, and they generally speak to patterns of energy that flow harmoniously together. They're not resisting each other. They're not in conflict with one another. They are supporting each other and working harmoniously through this triangle. Now, the opposition, because this is an opposition here with Neptune, adds, you know, an edge to it, which is good actually, because too many trines and too many sextiles, whilst they hold this incredible creative potential and juice. What can lack sometimes is the initiative and the push to get moving, to get the wheels moving, because trines have that energy about them where everything just sort of feels kind of so easy in a way, and there's not much there's nothing really uncomfortable. It's squares that make us uncomfortable and push us to act on a situation, because the situation is so uncomfortable that we actually have to do something to change it. So an opposition is a little bit similar, not quite the same, but an opposition works in a way where we can project energies become polarized, but that polarization ultimately brings a sense of awareness of some kind. That's what oppositions do. They help us see more clearly. The opposition is a representation of the full moon. That's what it is. It's a full moon phase, right? The opposition aspect. So it is Neptune, which does imply, you know, it can be very, very tricky in a lot of ways, actually. I posted something about Neptune just yesterday, asking people if they had any significant Neptune transits in the last couple of years, as I've had Neptune on my Venus, and I'm still in that transit. I've got one more passage to go. It was a 5-passage transit, which is huge, and of course describes my life the last couple of years, and it's been the most bizarre experience and the most blissful experience, and some painful experiences as well, all sort of wrapped in the one. So Neptune is an energy that is so, you know, so transpersonal, so non-physical, that when we try to bring in that energy, the Neptune energy, into the physicality of things, the tendency is to idealize, you know, to look through rose-colored glasses. And that's the downside, because that's what subsequently can bring disappointment, because we're not seeing a person, a situation, a condition, whatever it is, clearly. We're seeing it through the lens of Neptune, which is what we want to see. It's the idealized version, but it's not actually the real version, if you like. So that's why Neptune is a very, it's partly why Neptune is a very challenging energy. I guess, you know, at a very evolved, more conscious level, that the Neptune energy in this aspect pattern can really perhaps invite us more into our relationship with God, our relationship with spirit. If you don't like the word God, or you can replace it with goddess, it doesn't matter. God actually doesn't have a gender. We just use these words for various reasons, through historical, religious teachings, philosophies, whatever it is. But fundamentally, the ultimate source creation to all things doesn't have a gender. And that's where, once we start ascribing gender to God, that's where things can get tricky, because things become conflicting. You know, that's, my idea is this, your idea is that, my idea is right, your idea is wrong. And it's just absolute BS, because the source creation to all things is not about any of that. It's just pure consciousness, infinite pure consciousness, period. And we are an expression of that. So when it comes to Neptune, I feel that the best way to navigate and handle that energy and integrate and work with it is to surrender the ego, really, surrender the personality, you know, and that's not an easy thing to do. Most people don't do that, and most people don't know how to do that. So for those that are more conscious, spiritually aware, awake, and so forth, it doesn't mean that Neptune is going to be totally easy for you, not at all. You can still get completely blindsided by Neptune energy. But I guess what it comes down to is what your intentions are with that portal of energy. And in the case of a new moon, which is always a new cycle, a new lunation cycle, it doesn't change your life. I get so annoyed when I see YouTube videos of people who actually not even astrologers, and you know, the headline is this new moon is going to change your life, the biggest karmic, you know, clearings, the biggest karmic relationships, and all this absolute BS, right? It's just ridiculous. It's just superficial, mainstream, popular BS. Anyway, that aside for a moment, a new moon, however, is an opportunity for a new beginning of some kind. It's not going to change your life. It might change your life. If it does, it'll be because there are a number of different things being activated in your chart during this new moon cycle, right? Just to put it very simply. If it's not a time where you're going to have big turning points, then it's just an opportunity to use this lunation cycle in order to integrate with the specific archetype that's being emphasized, which is Virgo. And Virgo is one of the most complex signs of the zodiac. The three most complex are Virgo, Scorpio, and Pisces. I've said that before, and I'll say it to the end because they truly, absolutely are. So with Virgo, you know, we always are asked or invited into life and our thinking, our perspective, our daily rituals, our daily practices, the structure of our life, how we've got things organized or disorganized. All these different elements come to focus, obviously. And also, of course, matters of health can come into focus. That can be an inspiration to work more on one's health. That can be, if you're some type of practitioner, some new revelations or insights come to you at this time, or you start a new learning curve or tool at this time. There's myriad of possibilities. The first thing, of course, is to always check out, well, where does this new moon begin in my chart? So where is 21 degrees of Virgo? That's where you start, because that new moon is going to start in that part of your chart. And the area that the new moon is located in is just as important as the new moon itself, because it's speaking then to a very, very specific area of life. Each house has multiple layers, actually, but there are some very obvious and very specific layers to each house. And I say that because there are all these other layers that just are a little bit more obscure sometimes, or not known, because it depends, again, you know, what lens of astrology you're looking through, even for the interpretation of the houses. If you go to esoteric astrology, there's some layers involved in these houses that you probably are not aware of if you don't study esoteric astrology. Likewise, in medieval ancient astrology, there's a particular system that I learned through Bernadette Brady many, many years ago, where you work with triplicity rulers relative to each house. And she has some incredible layers of each house that you do not get from the traditional meaning of the 12 houses. I'll probably teach that next year as well. So reach out if you're interested in that one. So where is the new moon in Virgo in your chart? That area of life is going to be the commencement of this new moon cycle. The point, however, with this kite formation, just to circle back to that, because that's the biggest feature of this, I mean, we can break it down to individual layers. So the new moon is trine Pluto. That's fantastic. A trine aspect is non-resistant, right? So Pluto represents soul. It represents transformation, metamorphosis. It represents things appearing from the past. It represents the underworld. It can represent power struggles. You know, numerous things are associated to the planet Pluto. But fundamentally, it's a soul energy, right? It's the soul's desires. And in this case, we have a new moon with Pluto forming a supportive aspect towards this new moon, some sort of transformative process with the significators that Virgo speaks to, which is get your shit together, get your life together, get your routine together, get your health together, being more discerning, more critical, integrating more critical reasoning skills with what you are observing and looking at, because we are all very, very aware that as this life journey continues to unfold in this process of huge cataclysmic changes that we are still very much in, there's all sorts of data and information and so forth being released in every single direction, and so much of it is incorrect and false and deliberately fabricated and deliberately intended to produce fear and so on and so forth, right? We've all kind of clued into that if we were not aware of it 3 years ago. Some people still have blinkers on, perhaps many people still do, but a lot more people are, you know, there's the light bulb has gone off, right? And it's a moment of, oh, okay, so what I've been presented with, what I've been shown is not necessarily the actual truth. So Virgo is brilliant at discerning those kinds of things, because it's an archetype that corresponds to deep, complex analysis. So we have, you know, a lot of nuances, a lot of different layers to the archetype of Virgo. The Uranus being trine the new moon, of course, that brings in an element of, again, truth, authenticity, liberation, freedom, the typical Uranian significators. And because Uranus is trine the new moon, again, it's supporting this lunation cycle. It's supporting you in what way? Well, it could be supporting you to actually think outside of the box when it comes to your health issues. Virgo being connected to health, Uranus being the archetype that basically encourages you to think outside the Saturn square, the consensus reality. Like I said in a video not so long ago, I went to a doctor's appointment, and because I did not agree with a proposed medical treatment that this doctor suggested, I was thrown out of that clinic and asked to never return, because I had my own opinion, my own choice, my own perspective, which went against consensus reality GP, who's predominantly influenced by deepening the pockets of himself and that other ginormous organization that follows. I think you all know what I mean there. So Uranus is always a really interesting energy that can help us just, you know, think outside of the box in our circumstances, whatever they may be. And I feel that it absolutely speaks to nutrition, health, you know, all those sorts of things. And there's a myriad of different, you know, health matters that people are possibly dealing with. That could be in a so-called positive way, and that could be in a more challenging way. In whichever way it is, Uranus will bring in a greater sense of insight, because you might make a connection to a particular individual, or read a particular article, or decide to do your own research on a particular matter and come across some fresh, liberating information that doesn't lock you in to a very limiting and constricting perspective from a mainstream program. So, you know, individually, when you're looking at those aspects, those are some of the themes that I believe that that energy speaks to. And then, you know, you bring it all together. It's a grand trine, and then it's actually a kite aspect pattern, which is tremendous energy towards creative pursuits, creative inspirations, creative thoughts, creative passions, you know, whatever it is you want to do. And it is Earth, and Earth is a wonderful energy in a grand trine. All the grand trines are beautiful and have their own very specific meaning and interpretation and significators. But Earth always, you know, corresponds to the Earth, obviously. So it corresponds to the physicality, the matter of things. And a grand earth trine can really help us, you know, get it together when it comes to our experience on the earth plane. That could be in our work situation, in our creative pursuits, that could be in, you know, health matters and so forth, because Virgo, of course, is the highlight here, being, you know, the new moon being in Virgo. So, you know, earth energy really helps us ground and, you know, gain some practical insights being Uranus, practical being the earth element, and Pluto, you know, in Capricorn as well. Quite apart from what it's meant in Capricorn as a collective scheme, we're all pretty aware of that. But just from our own personal perspective here, you know, it's Pluto in Capricorn, so it's another earth sign. So we've got the earth trinity, you know, just opening up like a flower here. It's a really beautiful energy. We can harness, you know, it's like this harvest moon that we are harnessing, this grounded, sacred earth energy. And the Neptune, I think, is the voice that comes in and says, you know, it's aligned with spirit, and that alignment with spirit, which is the most important relationship you'll ever have, align it with everything that you do on the everyday mundane level. The sacred and the divine is in everything. It can be in how you organize food, in how you shower, in how you clean your house. The divine is everywhere in everything that you do. It's how you are doing it and the intention behind it, the awareness and the thinking that's going on at the time. You know, if you buy, at the moment, I'm really enjoying this beautiful florist that opened up down the road, and I'm just, every single morning I go to buy my coffee and I go in this flower shop and I'm just looking at these gorgeous, gorgeous flowers, which is Venus, of course. And Venus rules Friday, so every Friday I make sure that I get some flowers in honor of Venus. And that's a real kind of, it's a beautiful thing, but it's also a little spiritual ritual, you know. So it's the intention behind everything, you know, that means something, that creates a particular environment, vibe, energy, right, to what you are doing. So Neptune here is, of course, spirit, and it's holding this whole pattern energy together. It's holding the new moon, it's holding the grand trine. It's the ultimate voice, if you like. It's the ultimate energy of this entire pattern. So maybe that then is asking us as well to, you know, learn to be more humble, which is a quality of Virgo. Learn to let go and surrender a little bit more as well, as opposed to wanting to control everything, which in truth we cannot. We think we can, we certainly want to, but the truth is we can't. And the more we resist that, the more we come up against things that, well, I don't want to use the word challenge, because challenges are actually very healthy. They help us grow. But I guess I'm talking about a resistance that doesn't allow us to recognize when we must simply surrender to the grace of anything. That's what Neptune's about. It's the call to surrender into something that is much higher than us, because that's where we come from. We come from a higher source. And the separation, the apparent separation that occurs, is because we are in this physical body, but in truth, we are never disconnected from this higher source. We cannot be. We simply cannot be. So every experience is like a mirror, you know, it's a field and a mirror to reflect back to us just how aware or conscious we are of the way in which we are living, the choices we are making, the things we are doing, why we are doing the things we are doing, and so forth. So Neptune in a kite pattern just brings in that voice of spirit from a higher level, speaking to some type of surrender. Could be giving something to somebody, because Neptune is very much associated to sacrifice as well. So yeah, it just depends who you are, right? And how this pattern appears in your own chart and how you are connecting with this energy. But fundamentally, there's an opportunity here to be humble, work further on your daily rituals and practices and routines, and be more sort of mindful about how you are doing things and why you are doing them in the way that you are. Bring in spirit into what you are doing, in other words. It's bringing the sacred divine into matter, into the physicality of things, especially when you've got a new moon in Virgo opposite Neptune. That's the highest possible manifestation. You know, at the personality, ego, mundane level, that can be very, very tricky. New moon opposite Neptune, that can be a lot of disappointments for some people. You know, complete sense of disillusionment on certain things, just not being clear on what you are seeing. Maybe somebody is giving you completely false information about your health. Maybe it's intentional, maybe it's not. This is where you have to use the Mercury, which is stationary at this new moon. So powerful. Like this Mercury here in rulership and exaltation. Mercury is both exalted and is the ruler of Virgo. And it's stationary, just about to change into its direct movement. And it carried the same energy that this new moon is carrying. So we've got a repeated pattern that all is connected to the archetype of Virgo, because Mercury was in Virgo when it's stationed retrograde. The new moon is in Virgo. Mercury stationed retrograde with this same kite aspect pattern. The new moon picks up the same kite aspect pattern. That's not a coincidence. And it's all emanating from the archetype of Virgo in the various levels, or the various levels that Virgo actually speaks to. But, you know, again, to personalize it, just apply it in your own birth chart, you know, because this new moon is going to be very close to where Mercury also stationed retrograde in your chart. It might be in two different houses, so have a look at that, because that's going to be important. And also, you know, with Mercury stationing retrograde, it's reborn as a morning star. It had the Cazimi conjunction. There's, you know, when there's a Cazimi conjunction, a planet is said to be in the heart of the sun, there's something that happens to that planet. Now, there's lots of different ways that that is also perceived and understood depending on which teachings you go to. You know, there's some teachings that say when a planet is under the sun's beams, it loses its power. You know, it depends which teachings you go to, but I like to think of it as Mercury is, you know, it's literally in the heart of the sun, receiving the spirit rays, because the sun is spirit. So those rays of spirit are just, you know, holding Mercury, right? And then he gets reborn as the morning star, which is the god Apollo, which is a sun god. So there's tremendous spirit energy swirling all around us, which can be injected into creativity, inspiration, you know, deeper gnosis, studying for the soul, right? Bringing more meaning and richness to the quality of your life from a soul level, because you're inspired by this god Apollo and the wisdom that divinity can inject into us when we are, you know, attuned, aligned, integrating in some kind of way. There's so many beautiful energies here. I love this new moon. I love this kite aspect pattern. I love that Mercury is stationary retrograde, connecting to the god Apollo, had a Cazimi to the sun. I really love the feeling of this new moon. Now, if we were to project this on a collective global level, we might say that there might be some matters that come up from institutions or organizations or departments or voices of authority that might mislead or deceive the public with health matters. In fact, it's probably very likely, given what's been transpiring the last 3 years more specifically. So we need to have our wits about everything. You know, we need to be the one that needs to discern and decide and research and ask the questions. You know, people give their power away to authority and basically live on their knees. If you want to live on your knees, that's fine. Go right ahead. It's neither here nor there to me. It's none of my business. But it is, to me, it feels like a serious crime, right? To deceive the populace, to deceive humanity. I don't see that as being justified. So the point becomes then, well, people will turn around and say, well, that's what they said, and that's what he's doing, and everyone's doing that, and can't you see what's going on, and blah, blah, blah. And my question to those sorts of comments would be, well, how do you know? How do you know if that information is absolutely correct? Have you bothered to research, to investigate, to analyze it? Most people don't, because people are lazy. They just, you know, they just conform to a Saturn consensus, which provides a particular structure and sense of false, I like to call it false security, because there is no permanent security. There absolutely isn't. When you are living in this, you know, third dimension reality, in this physical form, there is no such thing as permanent security. Anybody who thinks there is very out of touch, very out of sync. So it is up to us to ask questions, to investigate, to search and seek for ourselves. So, you know, went on about that a little bit, but that's because Neptune is opposite this new moon, and this could be a potential disaster when it gets into the wrong hands. Neptune at that personality, mundane, physical level typically almost always manifests through deception of some kind, deception and disappointment. So it's up to us to, you know, to have the courage and step in our own shoes and stand in our own shoes and direct and live the life we were born to live, regardless of what's appearing out there. The other thing, of course, as well, is Saturn is opposite Mercury in this new moon chart, but Mercury has already moved past the opposition. So it's not as potent as it would be if Mercury was at the same degrees of Saturn or 1 degree of Virgo. See, Mercury is 8 and Saturn is just 2 degrees. So Mercury obviously has moved past the opposition, and because it's stationary, moving direct, it's not going to go backwards, it's going forwards. So it's past that opposition already. So, I mean, Mercury was opposite Saturn earlier on in August, I think it was. So there might have been some Mercury-Saturn matters that came up then. I don't necessarily see that as a repeat now, because Mercury is already past it. But if it does present anything, you know, it might just present a resistance, either a resistance in our own self or a resistance we experience out there from somebody or a group of people or whatever it is, to our own personal opinion. And that's where we have to be courageous enough to stand in what feels authentic and truthful to us, by way of doing our own research, investigation, and so forth. And Mercury in Virgo, don't underestimate the power of this guy in here. I call him a guy, but could be a girl. So yeah, Mercury in Virgo is, you know, prime position, exalted rulership, does very, very well in this sign, and it's stationary. So when a planet is stationary, it just means that it's stopped stop dead in its tracks, as it were, because it's preparing to change direction. That stationary period is loaded with energy and potential. It's like boiling this energy, right? And it's getting ready to launch itself. One last thing before I go, there's a fixed star with this new moon called Denebola, Denebola. And that particular star is part of the constellation of Leo. And there's not a lot of great things said about it, but I just want to make a couple of comments. So it sits at the tail of the line. So if you imagine the constellation of Leo, the lion, imagine a lion in the sky, this star sits right on the tail of the lion. And I think that the fact that it sits at the tail and it doesn't sit at the head or at the heart or at the paws, that has a very specific meaning unto itself. Even Ruman, made a comment yesterday where he said, when you have stars sitting at a particular point in a constellation, wherever that star is, in that picture, like yesterday we talked about the example of the two fish, Pisces, that are bound by a cord. And this was so intriguing to me because I wasn't aware of this. He said that if you have, a planet, for instance, sitting in, and we're not even talking about stars now, just going back to the constellation Pisces, looking at that zone where the cord holds the two fish together, they're bound by a cord. And if you have a planet in that cord, and it depends where you have it in that cord as well, and it depends on which planet it is and so forth, that's going to have a very specific meaning. So if you had Venus, he said, he pointed, I think, towards somewhere in the middle of that cord, that would, depict an individual who can be very sort of emotionally dependent on others. That was just one example he gave. So when you have a star, somewhere in a constellation, it's going to pick up different energies of that actual constellation itself, because the constellation itself has a very specific meaning, but then in different parts of that constellation, there are different nuances involved. So I want to ask Ruman what he thinks it means at the tail end of the lion, because he'll know, and I don't. And I tried to find information on it, and I couldn't. So the most I can bring to this is that the fixed star is conjunct this new moon, and it is said to be of the nature of Saturn and Venus, this particular star. And so it has some really strong points and good points, just to use simple language, and it has some points that are not so great about it as well, can be quite disastrous for some individuals. And that's the Saturn side of it. Saturn is a very hard energy, especially when you're talking about fixed stars. But of course, Venus is a benefic, so she brings in some type of charm here and some type of benevolence in some kind of way. And it is the lion, which is also Venus's animal when she is Ishtar, the goddess Ishtar of Akkad, Mesopotamia, Babylonian times. Her animal was the lion. And Bernadette Brady does actually raise that in her little description in Solar Fire, where she says this star is connected to the goddess and the power of the lion. So there is something very benefic about this. And she also said that it typically does speak to a person who will kind of go against the status quo, if you like. It's doing it your own way, doing it in a way that's not in alignment with the status quo, with the consensus. So you stand out kind of thing, right? but there can be, it can be your demise as well. It just depends how you handle it. Now I'm thinking high people at high-end positions, this lunation cycle might bring one of them down in some kind of way, because that's the nature of this star. It has that ability to charm, and it has some benevolent sort of quality to it and some strength, and it has that tendency to raise the person up, but then the Saturn edge comes in and kind of brings in the demise, and it can be, you know, a complete destruction of one's reputation, fall from grace, things like that. So it would depend on who the individual is, you know, where this star is in their chart and where this new moon is in their chart, and so on and so forth. But I just thought I'd mention that at a very simple, basic level, because let's see, you know, what shows up over the next 4 weeks in the headlines with people of authority and power and status in the world. I'm just very curious to see what will come up. Okay, I'm going to go. There were some other things that I wanted to bring up, but I think I'll go because I'm sort of running out of time here. Well, there is just one thing I would like to touch on. Venus stationed direct just recently, you know, just a few days ago. And so now we have, you know, the full new Leo morning star Venus in full momentum, if you like. Although she wasn't invisible here in Melbourne, as I've mentioned throughout other videos, because when Venus changes from morning star to evening star to morning star, she goes into the underworld, and there's a period of her disappearing from the sky. And it just so happened that in Melbourne, she didn't disappear at all. That's a phenomenon that only occurs every 8 years at different locations. So it's not a typical thing. It's quite a special omen. In any case, whether she was invisible or visible in your location, she's now out of her retrograde journey. She's completed whatever that retrograde journey has meant for you. And I know it's been a big one for so many people, because I've spoken to so many people and they've all said this particular Venus retrograde cycle, which is the Leo Venus morning star, has been huge for me in really profound ways. So many women have said this to me, and I have felt this even in my own personal life as well. And I just want to remind you all that this is a beginning, her moving direct, Venus moving direct, this is the beginning of this new 8-year cycle. So even if you had profound things happening at this time, get ready for more. There's more that's going to unfold really over the next 8 years with this particular cycle. And finally, I just want to also touch on Juno forming this conjunction to Venus. And I could do, you know, separate video on this and a whole class on it, because it's huge. It's a huge topic. But I just want to say one thing. Because Venus in Leo as a morning star is connected to the goddess Athena, which is the warrior goddess, which is the goddess that speaks from her heart directly, is transparent, is honest, comes from her heart. With Juno here, because Juno is a principle of many different things, but one thing she speaks to is the matter of injustices or unfairness or inequality. Juno will be an archetype. When she activates something in your chart, those matters come to focal point and they become primary. So if Juno does activate something for you at this time with Venus, that what I'm getting at is that there's a very passionate feeling behind a matter that maybe has occurred for you that has been unjustified, that has been unfair. And your position on it would be very strong because Venus is in Leo and Juno is in Leo as well. So we're talking about matters of the heart where you feel that you must honor your heart's position and especially if there's been an unjustified story that has unfolded. So I just wanted to mention that. Okay. I think, yes, that's about it. Well, let me just show you one more thing before I go. Let's have a look at this. So this is Rumen's program. This is a chart for the new moon. However, this is what you are seeing is the position of the planets according to the Babylonian zodiac. And see, Mercury is invisible. That the fact that Mercury is in a grey color, that's what tells us in Rumen's program that a planet is invisible. Now, let me just grab an annotation and show you. So there's the nebula. That's the star that I was talking about. Now, can you see the lion? So there's the lion, the constellation. It's quite a big guy, isn't he? That's a massive constellation. And there's a star called Zosma right there. But there's the nebula. See the tail? There's the tail of the lion. And that star sits right there on the lion's bum, so to speak, on the tail end. And one other thing that's interesting about this star at this particular spot, it's a little bit like if you know, cats can be, oh God, I could talk forever about cats, but cats can be, you know, very charming, right? They can be very soft, but you go to pull a cat's tail and, you know, watch what happens. You know, it'll shred you. That's what this star is capable of as well. There can be a real nasty side to it. So just another interesting detail. All right, I'm going to head off. And I'll see you guys very, very soon. Wishing you all a beautiful new moon. Hope you are inspired by this material today. I certainly am. And I'll see you guys in my class this it's Friday night for you in the Northern Hemisphere, Saturday morning for me in Melbourne. If any of you want to join that class, just send me an email. See you soon. Much love. Bye.